All right, welcome. So let's just go over what we've already covered. We've already done greeting the user, hard coding 6 entries, running the menu, printing the contents onto the screen, printing the report to the file, adding an item to the list, and we also have covered how to clear. All right, so the next things we want to cover is how to delete. So delete and update. So delete and update, that's selecting a D and this is selecting a U. Both involve using these two helper functions. These two helper functions are the display IDs function and the search function. So this display IDs function is just basically going to go through the list and display all of the unique IDs in the list and have the user enter which one they want to modify or delete. Then the search function is going to take that unique ID and go through and return the index or the location. So in the next slide, I'm going to give you a visual picture of what this will look like. All right, so here we are in our next slide. And so what you have is you have your list. Actually, I need a blank slide here. This one has more space. All right, so I have my list. This is my list. And just to remind you that my data type is student. So I have a student list, which is whatever size it's supposed to be. And in my student data type, I have a last name, which is a character array. I have a unique ID, which is an integer, and I have a GPA. Now, if you don't know how to define your student and set up your student and declare your list and all of that, you need to go back and watch the other video. In addition, you're not going to have only one field. You're going to have one of each type. You're going to have 2 of each type. So you will have 6 fields instead of 3. So here's a visual of my list. And my list has information in it. This is an array. So I'm just going to worry about the IDs, so I have a unique ID here, 32, 16, 41, and 12. All right, so each one of these is going to have like a last name. So it would be like Smith, Jones, and a GPA, 4.0, 4.0, etc. So this will also have a last name and a GPA and a last name and a GPA. So if I have 4 cells, if I have 0, look at what I did here. That 2, 3, 4, and 5. All right, so if I have something in list at index 0 and list at index 1 and list at index 2 and 3, that means that my count right now is 4. And if you go back to watch the other video, count holds the first empty location. So if I were to add, and again, I don't want you to get confused, but I will give these guys a GPA and a last name. And so I have 2 Jones in my class. All right, but it doesn't matter if the last names are the same as long as they each have a unique ID. The ID is the unique field. All right, so what delete does is it uses 2 helper functions. It uses display IDs function and a search function. So what the display IDs function does is it goes through and it displays to the user each one of these unique IDs. So it would go through here with a loop, and I'm going to show you how to do it in a minute, and display the 32, the 16, the 41, and the 12. And if you look at my music example, I also display the song. You can display the ID with the name, or you can just display the IDs. It depends on what your data is, what you are managing. But anyway, it's going to display each of these. So if the user selects, then the user is going to select it. And so if the user selects this 16 right here, then this is the one that they either want to update or they want to delete. So update you're going to have to figure out, but I will show you how delete works. So after the display IDs is done and the user selects the ID that they want to delete, then the search function is going to take that ID, which is the 16, and compare it against all of the IDs that are in the array. And if it finds a match, it's going to return the index or the location. So in this case, the location is 1. So the search takes the 16 that was input by the user, finds a match, and then it's going to return a 1. Then the delete function is going to take that 1 and it's going to go to the location of, this is count, can't read that. This is location count. So this is location count minus 1. So it's going to go to location count minus 1, take all of this information at location count minus 1 and replace it here. So this is going to be Jones, but not Jones 32 anymore. It'll be Jones 12 and a 4.0. And then you're just going to subtract 1 from count. So then count will then become 3. So this will then become your first location, and this will become count. So this will become your first empty location the next time you go to add. It does not actually flush the information out of there, but when you go to write your loop, when you go I equals 0, I less than count, it's only going to print this many. So you can see that we are not keeping it in order. If you want to keep your list in order, you're going to have to put comments when you submit it because it will mess up the grading for the user. All right, so let's get started on the first function, which is the display IDs function. So we have the display IDs function. Now this function is going to take, of course, your list. My data type is student, my list, and it's going to take the count. I'm just putting C here for count, and it's going to return the ID that the user wants to delete. So use the same kind of loop, and you're going to go for I equals 0, I less than count, I plus plus, printf, ID is %D, then that's going to be list at index I dot ID, and that's how you display them. And you put them onto the screen, and then you have to declare another variable for the current ID. And then you're going to ask, get, and return the current ID. Now this is right here, this ask, get, and return the current ID is something that we have been doing since the beginning of the semester. You just prompt. This is just displaying right here, this loop right here is displaying all the IDs onto the screen. This is the new part. So when the user looks at the screen and sees all of those IDs that are printed out onto the screen, then after it, you have a variable to store your current, a different integer, and you say, enter the ID you would like to modify or change, or enter the ID, because you could use this for the update or for the delete. So you say, enter the ID, scanf into the current ID variable, and return the current ID variable. So let's go to the search function. Okay, the search function also has an integer return type, but it's not going to return an ID, it's going to return the location. So the search function is going to take 3 arguments. It's going to take, oh, I don't know what happened there. Oops. It's going to take the student list. It's going to take the count, and it's going to take the ID that the user has entered. So what it's going to do then, it's going to use the same loop and go through the different IDs. So remember, we had an ID, I don't remember what they were, but 14, 16, 32, 12, 5. So if these are all of the different IDs, so and then count in this case would be what? 5. So it's going to go through here and return the index. So if the user picked a 32, it would return this index. So this is, you have to have unique IDs, and that's very, very important for this assignment. So all you need to do is do the same loop. And when you, inside of the loop, you're just going to compare. If ID is equal to the list at index I dot ID, then you want to return I, which is the index. And that's it. That's all this function needs to do. So you need to, first you need to implement the display IDs function. You get the ID from the display IDs function. You pass that ID here. This came from the return of the display IDs. You pass it in here. This is the ID that the user wants to modify or delete or whatever, and then you're going to compare it one by one through the list, each one, and if you find a match, then it's going to return the index. That's what this I is, and it's the index. So that's going to be returned from the search function. All right, so how do you do the delete function? Well, the delete function, so you have if selection equals D. Now I'm assuming that I've changed it to uppercase or lowercase. And I don't know if the variable I was using was selection, but this is in your whole menu. If the user selects D, then you want to call display IDs. Then you want to use printf to print the ID that was returned. And then you want to call the search function and use printf to print the index. All right, so then after you do that, what you want to do, then you're going to delete. Now you have to be very careful, because if the index is a -1, it will have serious issues with your array. So you want to make sure that if the search function returns a -1, that means that it did not find anything. So I left that part out for you to figure out on your search function. But if the search function goes all the way through and never finds a match, then you're going to have to return a -1 because it didn't find a match. Of course, I'm leaving a few things for you to figure out on your own. Now, if you do return a -1 because you don't find a match, there is no such thing as list at index -1. So this is very, very important that you realize that arrays start at index 0. So you have to make sure that if index is equal to -1, that means it was not found, then you want to print not found. And you do not want to do any kind of deleting, because you do not want to ever have the situation where you're trying to go to list at index -1. All right, and if you just put this condition here, that will avoid that problem. Else, you're going to perform the delete. Now, to perform the delete, it's very simple. This is the one we want to delete. It's at index I. All right, so, and this is the one we want to replace, which is at index count -1. And this is our list. So all you do is you're going to have to do two things on a delete. So you need curly braces. You're going to say list at location I, that's the one to be deleted, equals list at location count minus 1, because count minus 1, this is the last one, and then count, this is the first empty one, right? If you remember, so, this is count minus 1. So if you have 0, 1, 2, 3 items in your list, and then 4 items in your list, then count is going to be 4, which is the first empty, and count minus 1 is going to be the one that's all of the information at count minus 1 is going to be overwritten onto all the information at I. So you say list at index I equals list at index count minus 1, and then you have to say count equals count minus 1. So the delete is a very simple process. It's just 2 lines of code. But in order to do that, you have to find it. In order to find it, you need to display the IDs to the users. Then you implement your display IDs function. Then you wrote printf, and you try it a few times, and you make sure that it's working properly. Then you call your search function. Don't forget to add return -1 if not found. I did not show you how to do that, but it's not too hard to add that. Then you want to print the index to make sure. Then you want to make sure that if the index is -1, that you do not ever try to go to your list at location -1. It will cause your program to crash or do very strange things. There is no such thing as a -1 index. It does not exist. So you have to be very careful of that. And then this is the delete. This is the statement to delete, but you should understand what it's doing, not just copy down what I'm saying here. And after you delete, you want this to be your new empty spot, so you need to subtract 1 from count. So I hope this helps you, and update is much easier. For update, you would just call the display IDs, call the search, and then you're going to have to instead of in this part deleting, you're going to have to figure out what you want to update. So I would like for you to try to figure that out on your own. Remember not to wait till the last minute to get help on this assignment.